2024, 5:17 p.m. I need a motion actually to amend the agenda and swap the ordinance committee before the finance committee because Councilman Touchet's a little late. Okay, a motion and a second. I remind the council we need a unanimous vote on this to move forward with amending the agenda. So all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So that being done, we will move on to ordinance committee meeting chaired by Councilman Tony Hardy. At the council, sir.
Discussion and possible action pertaining to proposed ordinance changes to the solid waste ordinance, section 15-5.
And we're going to let the city attorney Bart lead us on this, and if I need, I'll supplement.
Okay. This is a ordinance that we are making a few changes and amendments to give more authority to code enforcement officer to write citations and enforcement. We're adding a provision at the end that we give them to do that, and a few changes really just about penalties, putting a penalty provision specifically for this violation. And it has to do with trash and landlords and when they evicted, putting it at the street, stuff like that. So really all we're doing is giving them a timeline of what they can put at the street if it's being picked up by the parish. Otherwise, they can't put it at the street. And the penalties and the authority to the code enforcement officer.
So our current ordinance is in line with the police jury, which states their policy that when you put something at the road, it can only sit up to a month. And a while back when we had this discussion about having the court serve the landlords with a letter stating they couldn't put it at the road, we discussed removing that provision out of the ordinance. That way it's not allowed to sit at the road for a month. And so that's one of the items that Bart and I have been working on. We do know that the court has been doing that process, when the landlords go to serve an eviction, the court is giving the landlord a notice that's signed by my office on city letterhead that says you cannot put it at the road. You either have to have an appointment to pick it up or you're responsible ultimately for hauling it off. I think Bart's recommendation would be to shorten it within 48 hours. So what is actually happening right now is if Brian finds a landlord or a rental property or a property that has a large accumulation of furniture and items at the road, he's having, I'll let you talk a little bit briefly about what you do, discussing with them that they're not allowed to do it.
So when I can get in contact with them, I let them know that, and I have been putting out in all of the violations since that time frame, that they have up to 24 hours to get it removed or to properly dispose of it either at the Mayan Parish Solid Waste Facility or another facility that accepts bulk waste. So currently, what I have to do is do a violation, send out the certified mail, the regular mail. You have anywhere between 10 and 15 days before that mail comes back to me. At that point, I can set a deadline of 10 days, and we're looking at roughly a month before anything can really be done out of my office. So
we're going to shorten all that by allowing them to serve that violation, and I think you can actually post it to the door. And Bart and I and he are working through the wording of that. Well, the reason we're proposing it in this manner before we bring it is because, once we start advertising the language, it costs the city money. And so if you have any recommendations, changes, or considerations that you would like to see added to the ordinance, we'd like to know that before we go through the process of rewriting the whole thing. So any council people have anything to add? Or
Councilman Hardy, this is an outstanding improvement on that ordinance. I visited and talked with a gentleman who has a huge pile on the road today. This is timely, and he knows he has to get it moved, and he has a company coming to pick it up. We have to shorten it. This is outstanding, no less than outstanding, because we don't have our own grab trucks. So we have to rely on the police jury, and their schedule is not always on the timetable of where this illegal dumping is. So thank you, Board. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chairman Hardy.
Yes.
And I'd just like to say amen, because you can ask Chris, that's one of my pet peeves. people getting evicted and they throw everything on the street.
Right.
So that's gonna shorten the time span.
Mary, is he gonna give
Well,
the right citation?
That is the goal, is to be able to have, I think, we determined
Yes.
that if we write it into code, that he would be able to write the citations,
That's correct.
correct?
For these ordinance violations.
For the city ordinance.
And it
It's a
would
civil-
go to
it's a civil
whoever's moving or the landlord,
I'm sorry?
the citation? Would it go to whoever is moving out of the residence or the landlord himself?
It would go to whoever put the items in the street.
Okay, but ultimately, the landowner is responsible. So we actually looked at, I think it was West Monroe, right? That has an ordinance that states that the initial violation is to the person whose I'm gonna say artifacts, are at the road, but ultimately the owner of the property is responsible, right? He's making revenue by renting the property, so if it,
The reason
yes.
being, the one that's gonna be leaving, he's not gonna leave
That's
you no
right.
address where he's gonna
That's
be at,
right.
he might be in another state.
That's right. And so this is kind of closing up that loophole. And Brian, did you have something to add? I know
So,
he does a lot of work on the research, so.
Basically, the way the revised statute states is basically anything that I can identify a person and or an address to in that file, they basically are the ones that accepting responsibility and would have issued the citation and have to appear in front of the court.
So that would include illegal dumping too, because we
Yes,
don't
ma'am.
have that. Okay,
Which is already a state law, and that's how
Yeah.
the state law reads.
okay, okay.
So
Okay.
how does that, excuse me, how does that fit in with the littering ordinance? Is that incorporated, is there some kind of way?
So
Littering,
they're both the same, you're just talking about a different section of the revised statute. Littering is intentional littering, putting it on somebody else's property without their permission, and or knowingly put something somewhere where you know it's gonna end up on the roadway or some other place other than being discarded just in a proper manner. The gross littering is what we're discussing, and that's the household furniture, office furniture, junk vehicle parts, stuff of that, appliances and stuff of that nature. But basically, the mechanism is the same as far as identification of who's responsible.
Does the audience have any comments in pertaining to this ordinance?
How does that tie into, people taking their trash and going dump it on somebody else's property?
That falls into the simple littering.
So suppose you can't identify who put that trash there and it's not the landowner that did it, because this is what you fix in the face. So you need to tie up all of these things. What about the tree cutters that go cut trees and they go on Messina and they dump them all in the pile right there? Nobody wants to take responsibility for them. It's not that property owner that did that, we just can't catch who's doing it, you know? So how does that all tie in legally on if somebody was to say, hey, I saw them doing it?
I mean, that just depends. I mean, it could get complicated in cases like that if we can't identify, people will have defenses to it, but, I mean, this is a step in the right direction at least.
When is the last time they did it, Chris?
Oh, they do it all the time,
Well, I have.
you know? I
Daily.
mean, I don't chase that anymore because
Daily.
Brian's doing it. But
Chief, maybe we can get some kind of cameras or something over there? You think?
So that happened,
Messina, where they're cutting trees and they're dumping them on Messina.
It's Messina, don't care.
It's all over, like right now, property owners hired a contractor to come in and cut, and I saw this. And someone went up to the contractor and said, you must haul that to City Hall yourself. And we're talking 3 or 4 weeks, maybe, Chris? And all those where they cut the trees that's still there in my district. And I'm not really sure that solid waste will pick that up.
solid waste will pick up the trees and stuff like that. What they won't pick up is tires. You can take them over there as an individual, as a resident of the parish. They'll take up to 5 a day.
Yeah, but we have, a law that says when a contractor comes into town to do a job, it's their responsibility, am I correct?
If you hire a contractor, that contractor cannot put any debris or any of that at the road. They are responsible and should be priced into their job to remove it from the property. They are not allowed to do the work and put it at the road.
And that's the policy that the city uses when we contract people remediate violations within the city. The problem isn't necessarily the trees and branches and stuff like that. What promoted all of this discussion and moving forward is the fact that, so if somebody gets evicted or somebody moves out, they put all of their furniture to the road. Initially, they might follow the Vermilion Parish guidelines and separate their trash accordingly. Problem is over that course of that 24-hour period and through the night, that trash is no longer consolidated neatly alongside the road and ends up being distributed all throughout the neighborhood, sometimes blocking streets and sidewalks.
And oftentimes blocking drainage.
Yes.
And just to clarify, one quick thing is that you said that the Vermilion Parish Police Jury will pick up trees, but there is a limit to the diameter and the length of the trees that they will pick up. So, you know, I don't remember the exact number, I think it's like 6 foot long and 18 inches, over 18 inches in diameter or something like that. But they won't just pick up large trunks of trees. That will sit there for 6 months because their ordinance says that they will not pick up over a certain size. So property owners need to know that too.
Same with the concrete blocks and tiles
Yes.
when they see them. They'll leave them sit right there on the side.
So basically, our ordinance was written following exactly what the police, not exactly, but close to what the police jury ordinance is. We know that once a month pickup roadside grab trucks, if people are putting it when there's 30 houses on a street and trash sitting for a month, that doesn't work in a city, right? So we don't have control over the service, so we're going to change our ordinance to say what we allow in the city, and we will continue to evolve it based on what comes of that. But we think that this is the first step in the right direction to give it a little more authority, give Brian more authority, make sure that we codify what we're requiring landlords to do, and holding the property owner ultimately responsible, you know, for what the condition of their property is, whether they living there or renting it out. Sorry, that was my comment. Chairman,
Is that the end of this?
any further
Any
discussion?
further discussion?
Moving on.
All right, we're gonna move on to number 2, discussion and possible action pertaining to proposed changes in chapter 12, article 6, freight carrying vehicles.
City Attorney Bart Broussard.
Council members, right now we have a very general article that prohibits trucks within the city limits unless they're operating on a state highway. It's not in our control. What I've been asked to do is look at that and possibly come up with amendments to be more specific as to where they cannot be and put penalty provisions within the ordinance. And it goes along with what we're doing downtown, you know, trying to keep the trucks. So what I would ask from y'all is to look at it and designate streets that y'all want to include in the amended ordinance for where we don't want trucks. Obviously, you know, State and Concord and Tivoli between certain spots, but if there's anything beyond that, please let me know and I can add that to the amendment.
The current ordinance, Chairman, I'm going to speak if that's okay. The current ordinance reads that we follow the state trucking laws and section 12-101, access limitation, designation of truck routes exceptions. It states no motor vehicle required to comply with this article shall be operated upon the streets, alleys, byways, or passages within the corporate limits of the city. So it's very generalized. Basically, it says they have to stay on state highways and not on local streets. And so one recommendation was that we put a specific fine, which is allowed by law, that can eventually be implemented or tickets written to those trucks that continue to violate it, right? As we've said from the beginning, we should have a period of education first and then a period of enforcement. So this is just us looking at what we have, looking at other cities that have ordinances. Of course, you're always, and by trucks we mean large, heavy, commercial trucks, and there will always be exceptions for trucks delivering to local businesses, because that always has, you have to allow a local business to operate. I know that Councilman Broussard has spoken about this numerous times, and after reviewing what we have in ordinance, we do think that assigning a specific fine, which board can bring back in the language what's allowed by law. But we just wanted to have an open conversation about it and see any input you have before we bring back specific language on how to amend it.
Thank you, Mayor, thank you, Board. We do need to improve that with the change of ownership of those streets and the improvements we are making to slow down traffic. So thank you both for your work on that.
So board will send out an email to the council on some language that he's working on, and if you have anything to contribute, just let him know, and then he'll bring it back and propose the changes in an open meeting. You want to ask if anyone else has any comments?
Anybody else have anything in reference to this ordinance?
Chief? Okay. Meeting adjourned.
Meeting adjourned.
Okay, we'll now move on to the financial committee meeting chaired by Councilman Francis Touchet.
All right, we have one item, update on revenues and expenditures after the fourth quarter of 2023. Steve Murphy.
Good evening. You have with you in your iPads, your tablets, your reports. We compare the first graph, look at the sales tax revenues for the fourth quarter. And I compared 2022, the first column, to 2023, the year we just finished. We took in $6,027,000 revenue this past year compared to $5.95 million the year before. So it held steady, $75,000 increase. So you originally budgeted a decrease for conservative reasons at $5.8 million, but again, the sales tax were actually higher than expected, so you amended your budget to be $5.95 million, so that's positive. We're positive 1% collections. Same thing on the water sewer. We had budgeted just over $2 million originally, or right at $2 million. They came in, water revenues came in at $2.1 million, 65,000 higher than the year before, and sewer revenues were 60,000 higher in 23 and 22. So we ended up having about a 3% excess over the original budget. So that is good news. And the electric sales revenue came in at $4,076,000, which is a $60,000 increase over 2022. And we got $76,000 over the $4 million budget for the year at 1.5%. So overall, your revenues, all categories, just over prior year as well as what we had budgeted. So that's how the year ended in the fourth quarter.
And I will say that I'm going to credit the positive water and sewer for the aggressive work that our water and sewer department and our public works department is doing, trying to fix problems that we find. So as we all know that our budget was a little over on expenditures, but I think that is going to eventually lead to a better revenue stream because we're not having so much loss. And we're going to work on that continuously throughout this year also.
Moving to the second page, we have the payroll for the city. General, top half of the page is your general government, which includes police, fire, administration, streets, parks, and the actual revenue payroll in 2022 was $4,590,000. In 2023, actual payroll was $4,786,000. So the decrease, actually an increase of about just under $200,000. But we had budgeted originally at $5.2 million. So you're actually ahead of budget for that $470,000. Again, that is attributable to the short staff in the police department. Fire department was under budget, and as well as street department. More significant categories. That results in a 9% positive variance. So payroll is down below 9%. In the utility fund, the payroll for the current year was $1.82 million, which is right in line where we had it in 2022. So we ended with $34,000 ahead of budget, positive, about 2%. And then so overall for the city, total payroll for all departments about 7% positive variance. Came in about $500,000 under budget in the current year. And then as we move to the expenditures, we do see some increases. In 2022, the general government expenditures total about $1.9 million. In 23, it was just over $2 million, so that's a $150,000 increase. We anticipated a slight increase. We budgeted just over 1.9 million. So expenses were 7.8% over budget in the current year, and you had amended it to incorporate that increase. The police department and the fire department. First, the police department came in under budget by 400,000 at 3.5 million in expenses. That was up 150,000 from the year before actual, but anticipated that it would have increased by 700,000 based on the raises that were given, and we had full staff of officers. But that was about a 10% favorable variance for expenses that were under budget. For the fire department, expenditures came in at 4.07 million compared to the year before, just under 4 million, 3.995. So that was about 80,000 actual increase from the year before. The budget was effectively just under 4 million, so within the 5% variance, you're about 123,000 over budget in the fire department on expenditures, but that's only 3%, and which is less than the 5% that the state law allows. Tree department, actual expenditures in 2022 was just under 1.3 million. Expenses actually were down about 25,000 actual. The budget was actually expecting a slight increase, so you were ahead of budget by 36,000 in the street department for the year. And then Parks and Recreation, pretty much the same thing. Actual expenditures for 447,000, which was right in line with the year before, $7,000 increase. We budgeted a little bit excess, about 8,000, so you were 2% favorable variance for the street department, Parks and Streets. So overall for the city, general operation government was over budget, but total general fund was about 1% ahead of budget. So right in line with expected in the original budget. And in the utility fund, we had just over 5 million expenditures in 2023, budgeted about 4.7 million. But the year before, you had 5.6 million. So actual expenditures in the current year that just ended were 600,000 less than the year before. Still ahead of what we had hoped for, and the budget was adopted, but not that far off. So, like I said, that hopefully that these improvements in the utility department will result in controlled costs, reoccurring costs, and keep the revenues like that.
Mayor, any council member have any questions for Mr. Steve?
No, I'm good.
Anybody from the audience? Will we adjourn?
Okay, we're gonna roll right